I'd spent so much time pushing that away because that was my dad. He was always cheating on my mum. I know he was in bed with another woman the night I was born. He'd hit on anyone, you know. If I brought a girlfriend home, he'd hit on her. No, I always swore I'd never be anything like my dad. There was no option there. You know, I was going to be loyal, I was going to be committed in a relationship.
Jerry's past is starting to give us more information about why he might have had this blind spot or was choosing to use the defense mechanism of denial to try to make his feelings go away because he doesn't want to be like his dad, somebody who is an adulterer, somebody who is able to cheat on a person. But by not acknowledging that you're capable of doing such a thing, if something is inappropriate or toxic in your family and it's modeled for you, you could absorb it unconsciously or reject it consciously. It doesn't mean that we're all doomed to repeat the past, but it does mean that there is some sort of inner conflict that can arise. And in different situations like this, it presents itself to you in a way that you have to make that conscious decision. Do you go towards breaking this, or do you follow in your dad's footsteps? Hi, it's Adele Kiddo, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist. And today, we are going to be reacting to the Only Humans video on Inside the Mind of a Cheater. What really happens? Me and my affair.
An affair the first time, or any affair, I suppose, when it happens, can genuinely be a mistake.
I remember getting in my car and driving away with this horrific feeling. I was just in my head, oh, I'm an adulterer.
In one night, we've obliterated 2 fully functioning families.
I was being unfaithful 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I just felt like the future that I'd always wanted had been taken away from me.
I just carried on and on and on. I just carried on getting away with it.
So right off the bat, we are going to be seeing a lot of cognitive dissonance. That is one of the major experiences that people talk about whenever they commit adultery. Really, what starts to happen is that you see yourself one way as a loyal partner, as a loyal wife or husband, and then your actions conflict with that image that you have of yourself. And that's where it gets really challenging for people, is when they come back to their senses. So we'll see how each person reacts and how it impacts their narrative and their healing process.
I think I'd always see myself as a pretty honourable chap. I liked being a good guy, if you like. My identity was driven by that. I think I was probably a typical sort of slightly awkward teenager. Romantic relationships were quite difficult to come by. As I got a little bit older, I got a little bit more confident. I think my looks had changed a little bit. When I eventually qualified as a doctor, women were oppressed by the job that I did. I had a serious long-term girlfriend, but I felt as though I was sort of torn between, do I try and continue a relationship with my girlfriend? Do I want to just be single and go and explore other things?
So right away with him, we can see that very common trope of somebody cheats when they have low self-esteem. He was describing himself as kind of like this ugly duckling who started to get a lot of attention and validation from women. And so this starts to shift his perception of himself when he gets that kind of attention. Again, with the cognitive dissonance, he has to split himself up in order for any of this to take place.
I have a normal, stable marriage with 2 children. I'm working, I'm earning enough money. It's just a complete replica of what I was brought up around and entirely normal. Yet inside of me, it's far from normal. I was serially unfaithful.
Just off the bat, we're hearing how normal his life is. And there is that misconception that people have that something is missing in the relationship whenever somebody goes out and cheats. But what he's saying is he had a very lovely family.
Yeah, no, I'd been friends with my wife for years. She's a very beautiful, glamorous woman. I just loved her for years. You know, she was my mate. There's no question to me that this was someone I could make a lifetime relationship with forever. I never ever thought about having an affair, ever. I never looked at another woman, you know, genuinely. I remember someone saying to me, so what if you and your wife ever split up? And I was like, that is never going to happen. I can tell you, absolutely, that will never happen.
The kids were about 17 when I actually found out that my life had been built on an illusion. It was like I just didn't know who this man was. I didn't know who my husband was anymore. It was like some imposter had invaded his body.
So Nikki is giving us the perspective of the person who's been cheated on. Description really portrays that experience of betrayal. And I think she describes it really well. It feels like your life was built on some sort of lie, that this person that you're with is an imposter. There's that cognitive dissonance, but on the other side of it.
I was very young, and a man walked in, and I looked at him, and I said, "This is the most beautiful man I have ever seen." Despite being with the father of my child, I just knew I had to have him. And he was telling me that his relationship is coming to an end because they'd grown apart. Inside, I was fist pumping like mad.
So Sonia comes off to me as somebody who is very, very loving and expressive. And you can hear in her language, that very poetic, flowery language, beautiful man. And she seems to me like somebody who is very capable of limerence, somebody who falls in love at first sight.
I would just try to be charming, entertaining, engaging, and also there was an element of me promoting my status as well. I made sure I did that. So I wasn't just a policeman, I was becoming a detective. And what I found is that girls like that.
It seems like he has been using affairs as a way to validate his desirability and his worth. And he uses the word status that he can kind of reinforce to himself.
I wanted to be a good boyfriend. It's just that I also wanted to have sex with other women. I was serially cheating up on her, usually having the form of casual relationships. So meeting somebody, having a sort of casual physical relationship with them over a period of weeks. There were times when there was other women's underwear left in my room. My girlfriend would be there and I would kind of spot it and have to sort of try and hide it away. The more I got away.
There's something about the way that Tom recounts his cheating escapades that makes me feel like there is a part of him that still holds some sort of pride about it. I don't know if that smirk is because he's nervous or body language just comes off that way. I don't know what you guys think.
Way with it. That just fed into my belief that I could keep on getting away with it. And the sense of relief that brought is probably one of the better feelings I've ever had, actually even better than having the sex in a way.
What a lot of people who cheat do, a lot of serial cheaters, is their ability to compartmentalize being that good partner and then also having these flings on the side. He's able to live a double life, and he's describing becoming almost addicted to that feeling. There's a high that you start to get when you can get away with something. The riskiness and that thrill increases that dopamine, and every time he doesn't get caught but he's close to that edge, it starts to become a stronger urge to continue that behavior. It's kind of like gambling, that high and low, intermittent reinforcement. You never know what's going to happen.
I didn't see my relationship with this man as an affair. I didn't feel that I was cheating because at the end of the day, all we were doing were long drives and talking. We were lying to people. We were trying to conceal our tracks. We really tried hard not to be seen together. And I can see that other people would say, yeah, that's cheating, that's having an affair.
So with Sonia, I said before, she really sounds like she engages in these fantasy deceptions, meaning that she has that cognitive dissonance reaction where rather than owning up to it, she wants to continue it by making justifications like, oh, it's not anything physical. I think the best rule of thumb, I would say, is, are you keeping anything from your partner? That's considered cheating. And is this something you would say in front of your partner? Why would they have to cover their tracks if it weren't an affair?
But I think it was a classic case, which is, very common, which is once we had kids, then that, she never left me for another man, but I felt kind of, oh, where have you gone once we had kids? And if you're a secure man, I think that's fine. And if you're not, which I wasn't, then I think it was problematic. And I think that's probably why I went and fucked it all up.
I hear some self-awareness with Jerry, and that's probably something he learned about himself in hindsight. But what he's describing here really is kind of like that hairline crack in a glass that's invisible and then starts to break off until it spreads and shatters. When he says that this is a very common thing in relationships, when people transition from having kids, the relationship does change, but the insecurity and the affair is the weakest point. You become susceptible, and theirs perhaps might have come from a place of not communicating their needs, or like there was a growing distance that neither of them talked about. Maybe there was also him deriving all his worthiness and emotional connection onto his wife versus being able to address. And I'm already starting to hear with him that there is this sense of I don't want to say like this arrogance about his way of perceiving his ability to cheat. Like, oh, I would never, like, I'm too good to cheat, or like I'm totally satisfied. Like he's kind of rejecting his own needs, which is that hairline crack in the glass.
One day she said, look, could I have a chat? She said, there's something going on between us. I can feel it, And I denied it flat. I kind of went into a panic. I was like, no, I don't fancy you. There's nothing going on here. For the next year, I kind of kept my distance, but felt an incredible pull towards her. It's like I'd really hoped to run into her in the dining room. And when we did, it would I'd get super adrenalized and charged up. We started texting, and that just opened another door. Yeah, no, I started to get really concerned, so I went to my wife and I said, look, this is going on. I don't feel good about this. And maybe it was even as a way of trying to get some attention back. Her response was, you ever speak to her again and the marriage is over.
Like I was saying earlier, it really sounds like Jerry tries to suppress his limerence, his feelings, and even tells on himself to make it go away versus addressing what that's really about.
I had this very successful corporate career, which could be highly pressurized at times, but I was really, really lonely. My friend persuaded me to download a dating app. The word love came in about 3 dates, being really honest. It was all very fast, but it just felt like the right thing. Everyone that met him fell in love with him, as well as me.
I stayed away from the woman, but the charge just got bigger and bigger and bigger. I became obsessed with her. I ran into her, bumped into her, and it all came flooding back. We were both in agreement that we didn't want to fuck our lives up or anyone else's, that we liked each other, but nothing was ever going to happen, and we were going to be really adult about it and just walk away. And she went, no, that feels much better. And I was like, okay, great, thank you. Gave her a hug. That was that. It wasn't a hug, she was all over me. And I was all over her. So it was just like, bang. And we'd done this fucking 2 hours of talking it through. I really thought I was in the clear.
I don't know why I'm picking on Jerry. But I do want to point out that there were multiple times he self-deceived, whether it was telling his wife or talking it out with this person he was working with, the person he has this crush on. But now they're in this co-fantasy, this deception. And at this point in time, every interaction, I'm guessing, while they were working together, held such strong meaning. And by suppressing it, it only makes it stronger. These are the turning points where one has to make that hard decision to go no contact because there's no denying it and it only grows from this ambivalence.
The day when I finally decided to tell the father of my child that I am leaving him for another man, I just simply said, I'm leaving you for another man. I can't do this anymore. I've been in love with him for months now, and as painful as it was, I was elated because finally I felt free to be with the man of my dream.
Sonia is very much in the thick of the fantasy that even as she's saying these words and telling her husband of a long time that she's in love with a man she's only known for a few months, like the reality is that she's breaking his heart and breaking up her family. But because she's in the thick of her fantasy, of course, the feeling that comes from doing this is freedom.
And as part of my training meant that I had to go away to a residential training school. There was a culture of, you've heard the phrase, what goes on tour stays on tour. I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be seen to be one of the boys. And I saw a couple of girls who were dancing together. We left the nightclub together. And that was the first time that I was unfaithful to my wife. From then on, any chance that I had an opportunity to stay away from home, I would be looking for an opportunity to have a casual sexual encounter.
There's a couple things that I've noticed. When he was talking about how it began, it kind of sounds to me like it came from a place of having low self-esteem and wanting to prove himself. And then also having very poor boundaries and being easily influenced by this culture of what goes on in tour stays in tour. But then it starts to devolve into him being the kind of cheater who is more of an opportunist, that anytime they have an opportunity to cheat, they will take it.
The affair then lasted about 4 or 5 months. I mean, I was kind of in a split personality of, going home, going to work, and then having this secret life on the side, and all the time kind of watching the part of me that was having the affair with kind of bafflement going, who the fuck are you? Where did you come from? I don't recognize you. I thought, really? You're me? That's not me. I'd spent so much time pushing that away because that was my dad. He was always cheating on my mum. I know he was in bed with another woman the night I was born. He'd hit on anyone, if I brought a girlfriend home, he'd hit on her. No, I always swore I'd never be anything like my dad. There was no option there. I was going to be loyal, I was going to be committed in a relationship.
Jerry's past is starting to give us more information about why he might have had this blind spot or was choosing to use the defense mechanism of denial to try to make his feelings go away because he doesn't want to be like his dad, somebody who is an adulterer, somebody who is able to cheat on a person. But by not acknowledging that you're capable of doing such a thing, if something is inappropriate or toxic in your family and it's modeled for you, you could absorb it unconsciously or reject it consciously. It doesn't mean that we're all doomed to repeat the past, but it does mean that there is some sort of inner conflict that can arise, and in different situations like this, it presents itself to you in a way that you have to make that conscious decision. Do you go towards breaking this, or do you follow in your dad's footsteps?
Looking back where the trouble started, we had a series of traumas. My husband grieved, but wouldn't grieve with me because he felt he had to be strong for me.
We're hearing where she suspects it began, this separation of sorts. Again, when there is a life transition, that's when affairs typically happen. It's not just like when you have kids, it's when there's a distance that's starting to grow, like that hairline crack in the glass.
The first night we spent together, there was all this passion and all this yearning and all this wanting, and it finally happened. It was absolutely magical. In time, the relationship became volatile and it kind of started to fall apart. Partially because I felt that I was repeating a pattern of my parents' behavior. Because I could see them being completely in love and lovey-dovey, and then the next moment, it was gone and they were shouting and throwing things on the floor.
So she's similar to Jerry here, where her relational patterns are starting to come out. Once the fantasy ends, you have to dig deeper and to see that your stuff is it's gonna force you to work on it. She is no longer asleep to that.
I kept seeing this woman, and it was like we were both in this very forbidden situation, and that created an incredible bond. I think that's the truth of it. It's like we were both on this desert island together, and we were the only people in the world who knew this terrible thing we were doing, and it made us very, very close in a very toxic way. Part of my staying in it was, I think I freaked out. You know, I thought, if I piss her off, she's going to blow the whistle. And keeping seeing her, partly out of lust, but largely out of fear.
Jerry, like many folks who stay with their affair partner, often are motivated by what we would call an obligatory relationship, or even a trauma bond. There's something that keeps them together, and the toxicity of it all keeps them binded. He's afraid, essentially, that she will say something if he were to try to end it.
I got a voicemail when I came out of work late one night saying, I found an email, I know what's going on. I've changed the locks, don't come home. And I felt so relieved.
That was the pain.
I guess it's like being on death row and getting an execution date.
Beating him up, and now he's free.
Just, the waiting's over.
He started telling me the reasons why his marriage wasn't where he wanted it to be, how in his mind it was over. Then he packed up his stuff and then he left. He was going home to his wife. She was messaging me. She asked me if I respected marriage, because if I did,
we're hearing
I needed to leave him alone.
Who were hurt in the
Hear her pain was just awful.
The love of my life is leaving, and I didn't hear from him, and it was devastating. And in a way, I thought, that's what I've done to the person I left behind.
That part just kills me. It's sad to me that oftentimes it takes being left to empathize with the person that you left behind.